Welcome to the Yearning Heart podcast, where we discuss with everyday people our journeys towards love, our growth, and the yearnings of our hearts.
I think that I originally equated drama and with passion and passion with love. So someone who was just nice and normal and easy to get along with, I think for quite a few years I've considered that boring. And so I was sort of addicted to that high drama relationship.
Hello, and welcome to the Yearning Heart podcast. I'm Jennifer Lear, your host. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Our guest today is Janice, and Janice is going to talk about her journey moving from insecure relationships when she was younger to the creation of a secure relationship with her husband. I hope you enjoy the episode. Today we have Janice, and Janice is going to talk to us about her journey through relationships, the relationship she's in, what works, what doesn't work, wherever she wants to go. And I just want to mention that Janice has been married for 25 years and has lived together with the person who is her husband for 32 years. So this is a successful long-term relationship that her and her husband have managed to work out. Janice, we have a lot of possibilities in terms of what you want to talk about, but I like to start with, just the idea of talking about relationships, what does it bring up for you?
Well, I have been on a journey where my idea about how relationships work changed drastically from the time I was a kid until now. I grew up in a family where we weren't allowed to ever make any waves. I watched my mom do nothing but try so hard to make my dad happy. And I sort of took on my mom's personality. So in my early years in my relationships, um, I did the same thing she did. I gave myself away and always thought it was my fault if things didn't work out. And that is not the way that I am now.
What helped you change?
Some school of hard knocks in my early adulthood. I got involved with mostly narcissists who, in a lot of ways was, getting involved with the way my parents' relationship was. My dad is definitely a narcissist as well. So I guess that just felt like home to me. But after one long-term relationship, bad relationship, and then a short-term marriage, I finally figured it out and I knew how better to draw my boundaries and I knew what I wanted for in a relationship.
And this has happened before you met your current husband?
Yes.
That's good.
Although when I met him, I held him at arm's length for 7 years, just because of what I had gone through in the past.
Wow. So you weren't feeling safe to commit again.
Right. Yeah.
And it
I was pretty much convinced that I needed to live independently and not try to share a life. What I learned from my earlier relationships is that I wanted something in a relationship that people just weren't able to give, to get to know them deeply. But fortunately, I found that with my current husband, and that's why we've been together for so long.
right.
Yeah.
What convinced you that it was safe to commit to him?
Um, his, I think it was mostly his commitment to making it work. I expected him at some point to walk away because I wasn't letting him in, but he hung in there with me and understood what I had been through and had faith, I guess, that, I could make that change. And when we got married, I was still on the cusp. But I had decided that I would take that leap, and then he proved to me that it was all worth it.
That's nice. That's a nice story. Yeah. But you guys must have issues. Everyone has issues in their marriage. I mean, you don't have to talk about them if you don't want, but curious, when you do have issues, how you navigate through them.
Well, early in our relationship, it wasn't so easy. I mean, it took us a long time to learn how to do that. Looking back on when I met Greg, now I can look back and think we were kind of an odd couple. We were very different in a lot of ways, and he had his own way of things that he, I think, adopted from his dad. When he got stressed out, it was not easy to deal with. And of course, I was raised to never make any waves, and so that kind of behavior always shocked me. But we worked it out together, and I feel like we, over time, went from two separate places to learning how to be way quite a bit more similar in the way that we dealt with relationships. And we learned how to discuss things out, and we learned how to respect each other. And I guess what's most impressive to me is that we used to fight, but that's pretty rare anymore because we have learned that that doesn't work, and we've learned how to solve problems without the fighting and remain respectful through conversation.
So you're saying, if I backtrack a little bit, you're saying that he used to freak out,
Mm-hmm.
get like upset,
Yes.
and you used to caretake,
Yes.
and that combined was not functional.
Right. Yeah.
And over time, he learned to keep himself calm, and you started standing up for yourself more.
Yeah. Well, I guess I stood up for myself from the beginning, but didn't, I couldn't communicate in at the level that he was used to communicating. So we over time learned to calm down and discuss things out, um, without having any drama.
Right. So now it's fairly peaceful.
Yes. I mean, it's quite rare that we even have an issue anymore, just
Mhm.
because we've had 33 years to learn how to set a home for ourselves that we both like. And
Right. So I think you're also saying that you feel emotionally safe in your relationship, uh,
yes, very much so.
and that you both trust each other and you respect each other as individuals. You don't have to match each other. Because I know from knowing you that you have some major differences in who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, one of the things that I loved to learn about our relationship is that yes, we're different, but those differences complement each other. Where I'm weak, he's strong, and where he's weak, I'm strong. And I don't know if that came about just because of who we are, and so it just sort of balanced out, or I don't know what, but I'm very, very happy with our relationship now.
That's so nice. So, one question that I'm curious about is you mentioned, when you were younger, you picked different kind of people.
Yeah.
And so your picker, as we call it, has changed.
Yes.
And what helped you change that other than hard knocks? I mean, when did you start seeing that you were picking the wrong kind of person?
I think that I originally equated drama and with passion, and passion with love. So someone who was just nice and normal and easy to get along with, I think for quite a few years I've considered that boring. And so I was sort of addicted to that high drama relationship.
Right. I think that's actually really common.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a while for people to realize that drama and love are two entirely different things.
Yes.
And you're happy you came to that realization.
Yeah. Yeah. I look back on it now and I can't even believe that that was what I thought I wanted. Um, and in that way, that is not what I grew up with. My parents, I don't remember, maybe one time for 10 seconds, I remember seeing them argue. But other than that, that was not a part of the family.
And why didn't they argue?
I I'm sure that they did behind closed doors, but I think it was important to them to protect my sister and I.
From whatever was going on between them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you grew up in a household where it felt like they had a good marriage.
Oh yeah, I thought I grew up in a Norman Rockwell painting. I thought everything. I remember comparing our family to my friends' families. I really thought that we were special because of that, because it was so idyllic and straight out of a Hallmark movie. It was only after I got to be an adult and I started looking back on it and realized that that wasn't really the case.
In terms of your parents'
Yes.
marriage,
Hmm.
right? And now you have a different perspective on what was going on there.
Very much so. It
Yeah.
was not, and it still isn't. My parents are still around. Not an equal relationship. My mom is a giver, and she will always self sacrifice for others. And my dad is not that kind of a person. So he was quick to take advantage of that, and he still does. Although now my sister and I give him a lot of flack for it, and I think he's straightened up some.
So he's become more aware of himself because you and your sister have challenged him.
Yes.
It
And
sounds
I don't know, at a point where they're in their 90s, I don't know if that's a good thing to do to a person or not, but it was important to us. So that's what we decided to do.
I think it might be okay to learn and grow until you die.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, as long as you don't create too much suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a
So
balance. Yeah.
we're not too hard on him, but we do point out our opinions.
But do you feel like in your current relationship you're still growing, or it's not really that in that place anymore? It's more just in a supportive, we love each other place.
Oh, we're still growing.
You are.
Um, yeah. I mean, not that there's problems that we have to solve necessarily, but I feel like I love him more now than I ever have before, and I expect that that will continue. It's You'd think after 30 years you would have come to an ending point as far as, getting to know each other, but that's still happening. So,
You're still getting to know who he is,
uh-huh, right.
and vice versa.
Mhm. And what makes that great is that luckily, in both cases, we like what we see and we learn about each other. So,
Right. It's a mutual admiration club.
mhm.
It's always good. So, um, a lot of relationships have dynamics where one person is pursuing connection and the other person is, pursuing possibly in a way that is pushing the other partner away, or the other partner hides, which triggers the pursuing partner. And that is what happens in insecure relationships. But what you're describing is a person, yourself, who's moved from what I would call insecure relationships into a very secure, safe relationship. And does that sound accurate?
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
So
And
this is,
and I feel so fortunate that I finally found that.
yeah, no, I mean, well, you didn't find it, you created it. I mean, you built it, you worked on it. You guys made decisions and choices. No, we're not going to fight about this. We're going to find a different way. I mean, that takes some ability and will and perseverance. So I just think it's good for people to hear, to listen to people who have secure relationships, because there's so many people that don't,
Hmm.
where they haven't been able to work through whatever is going on between them to create that. So I have another question, and this one hopefully it won't be a bad question. I know that you're a vegan and your husband isn't, and that's a very big philosophical difference. How do you guys navigate that?
Um, we have worked it out. Anything that has to do with animal products that he wants to eat, he needs to cook it himself. I don't really like having it in the house at all or smelling it, but I realize that we share this home together. And so we have to, compromise. And in his, I fix dinner every night, and I, of course, cook vegan, and he is happy with what I fix. I pack his lunch every day, except I don't, he has to put his own meat on it. I put his sandwich together, but I don't touch or handle the other. And it works. I mean, like I say, I'd prefer it. There was no such thing as animal products in the house. He would prefer it if I ate meat and we could share that together. But we've accepted each other's
Right. It sounds like
diets.
you've really accepted that you both stand in a different place here and both of you have come to terms with it,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you need that to navigate differences that are stark.
Yeah. I'm vegan for a few reasons, but most of it has to do with animal rights. And so, personally, when I think about him not acknowledging what to me is just so plain and clear about the suffering that animals do, that's a bit disappointing to me because I expect so much out of him because he's such a smart guy. But I know everybody's on their path. I mean, I used to eat meat, and then I went to vegetarian, and then I went to vegan. So, and I know what that process took. It took time.
Yeah.
Um,
So you are seeing it from the perspective of everyone's on their own journey and
right,
not everyone can be where you are.
right.
Yeah.
And I can't, just because I had that realization, I can't expect everybody else all of a sudden to see it that way too.
Right. Right. Yeah. That is a helpful perspective in many areas.
Yes.
Okay, so let me think how I want to say this. So, see, a lot of my questions are for people who are struggling, and what do you yearn for, that kind of thing. And I can't go there with you because you are in a very secure, comfortable relationship where you guys have worked out a lot. So, my questions are more about you, how you became who you became, the influences, because you have transcended your parents' marriage.
Hmm.
Your parents' marriage was not as, even though it looked good on the outside, it was not functional the way yours is functional. It sounds like your mother might not have felt completely emotionally safe, because she was in a different kind of relationship and also a different generation, which completely affects what people expect from their relationships, what they give up, what they stand up for in themselves. And it sounds like you've had this long journey and have transcended where you started in a big way. And what do you want people to know about that? Like, what did it take for you to do this?
Um, well, first off, to give up and reestablish what I considered a good relationship or an enjoyable or exciting relationship. I had all the wrong ideas to begin with. I, over time, learned how to let my guard down after, the previous bad relationships. And that mostly took trust. It
Mm-hmm.
took trust in who Greg was. And he just happened to be a person that has a lot of integrity. And that's what it took. I give a lot of credit to him. If he would have been another one of those guys, I would still be in a bad place.
So you got handed a good guy to work with.
What?
You got handed a good guy to work
Yes,
with.
yes. Third time was a charm.
Why do you think you had the drama addiction, we'll call it that,
Yeah.
when you were younger?
Yes, that's a good term for it.
Yeah. Why do you
Hmm.
think you had that?
Why did I?
Why do you think that came, where do you think that came from?
I guess because that was what I was handed. So I learned that the pushing and pulling, I mean, I learned improperly, but I believed that the pushing and pulling was part of the passion in a relationship. And it took, like I said, I think I said it, it took some time to get over not having that, thinking that, my life was boring without it. I know
Mm.
I'm not being very articulate here, but um, I needed that, what I thought was passion. Otherwise, it was not an exciting relationship. That's what I believed. So when I finally found someone who, wasn't a part of that either, I had to learn a new way of loving a romantic relationship.
Right. Loving a relationship that was smooth and not big ups and downs.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
See, I'm imagining that even though you grew up in a Norman Rockwell, is that what you called it?
Painting, yeah.
Yeah, that even you grew up in that kind of situation, that unconsciously you could feel stuff. And even though you didn't consciously know it, your body knew that things might not have been perfect.
Mhm. Mhm.
And some of that carries through uh, because we are imprinted with how people relate, our parents relate to us. And then when we go out and we're given certain skills, like your skill set was taking care of people. So when we go out and choose, we automatically choose relationships. It's like the foot and the footprint. So your footprint was I adapt and take care of people. So the foot that would step into that would be something that needed someone who to adapt and take care. So you would unconsciously have drawn that in until you did the work to go, this isn't going to work for me anymore. Even though it's a slow inch by inch process, usually it's not usually, it's just a quick turnaround.
Yeah. Well, and growing up, I watched my dad manipulate my mom, and I watched my mom buy into it. And she would think, he's mad. I must have done something wrong. I'm going to try harder because there must be a magic point at which, I will be accepted and he won't manipulate me anymore or give me a bad time. And so I took that personality on in my and early 30s, thinking that, with these guys, that there was something wrong with me every time it would fall apart.
Right. Not that the other person might be responsible,
Right. Yeah.
or at least have a percentage of the responsibility.
Uh-huh. So I guess, to a large degree, it's just maturity, eventually realizing that it's not me. It can't always be me. And I have to draw my line and not fall into that pattern.
So you develop more self worth,
Yes, very much so.
relational self worth. You might, because people can have self worth, like you might have had self worth in certain parts of your life, but relationally, it wasn't where you started with self worth.
Hmm.
And somewhere along the way, you started realizing, wait a second, I'm worth something too.
Hmm. That's, I think, what happened.
Yeah. And then God's gifted you with your current husband, so to speak.
Not that he's perfect or anything.
Nobody's perfect. So, what's your growing edge right now in your relationship?
What is what?
Your growing edge.
What? Give me a.
Like where is the edge where you're still growing? Where do you do your work still? What's being like for me? It might be being more patient. That's
Mhm.
where I might be working on. But what would yours be?
In my relationship with Greg. I mean, there's still things, I'm sure everyone can relate to this, that irritate me. I we'll have a conversation about something, we'll make an agreement. He does pretty well for a little while, and then he just falls back into the old habits, and I think he just completely forgets about it. I don't think that he consciously makes that, but it's just old patterns that come back. And that I am learning to let it roll off my shoulders, where it used to be that I could not stand that, especially after we've already agreed to a new way of doing things. But I in my old age, I'm learning more about what's important and what's not, and that if I let things go and just accept them, they're not really as big of a deal as I
Right,
originally thought. Yeah.
right. So instead of it being like the Princess and the Pea, where you can still feel that irritant under there, it's sort of like it's not personal. He's in his own life. He's busy. He's in his habits. He
Mhm.
forgets,
Mhm.
and sort of giving him more space to be an imperfect being.
Right. It used to be that I would just drive that issue home if it's being what I felt was being ignored. And now, I mean, I'm not 100% perfect at it, but I just figure it's not worth it. You have to pick your battles.
Right. Yeah. So you aren't picking too many battles. I have one more question that you reminded me I should ask a minute ago, and that is: has the age difference with you being a bit older been problematic in any way, or anything you've had to navigate with that?
It definitely was early on. And there were times when I felt like um, I was raising a kid. But back then, let's see, he was 28 and I was 37. And so I think that the growth levels, as you get older, were further apart. Now it really doesn't make much difference. I think, the ratio is way smaller than it used to.
Right, right, exactly. Instead of, you're 25% older, you're, 5% older or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Right, right, right. Oh, that's interesting. So early on, it was more difficult because you were dealing with you both were less mature, but the gap was bigger
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
maturity.
That was enough of an issue for me that I talked to a therapist about it. And when I told her, like I felt like I was raising a kid, and she says, "You will always have that difference, and that will always be, where you're at." But that didn't end up being the case. All it did was scare me, but that wasn't the case.
Right, because he caught up with you in terms of percentage lived.
Right, right,
Yeah,
exactly. Hmm.
yeah. So that's interesting. So to end, and I'm just going to ask this, even though it might not be. I don't know. You may have already answered it, but like, what do you yearn for in your relationship at this time?
I look forward to a new chapter in our lives. I'm older than Greg is, so I'm pretty much retired. He's still working. And he's hoping that he too will retire in about 5 years. And I look forward to being able to have time to travel and do some other things that we really haven't been able to for a while. We've been real busy building our house and dealing with my parents who are elderly, and we've had a lot on our plate. So I guess just being able, I feel like when we get to a point where we're not pouring a lot of money into a house and not taking care of elderly people, that we will have some new space to get to know each other in new ways that we don't even know what they are yet.
Right. So actually having more space for the two of you to do new things and not have so much weight and responsibility on you.
Hmm.
So
Right.
your relationship would actually have a more lightness to it
Mhm.
in terms of that.
And when that change happens, I'm sure there'll be challenges too. I'm used to having the home to myself every day.
Right.
But, it'll just be a new chapter in our growing relationship. So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Well, Janice, it's been really fun talking to you.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me in this podcast. I hope you found it both interesting and informative. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe on whatever channel you like to use. You can also find me on social media, usually under Reconcile. And just a reminder that we have a relationship app called Reconcile out to help you create your best relationship. And it's in both the Apple App Stores and the Google Play Stores.